That is not just the stupidest statement I've heard somebody make. It also, frankly, borders on being a traitor to our country. That's the problem, is that it won't just be the president who pays a price for stupidity. It'll be a threat to all Americans. Yes. I'm Leon Panetta, former Chief of Staff to President Clinton, former Director of the CIA, and former Secretary of Defense to President Obama.
Well, Leon Panetta, what would a second Donald Trump presidency mean for the United States, in your opinion?
Well, I don't think there's any question that it would threaten our democracy, which isn't to say that our democracy is not strong. I think it is, and I think its system of checks and balances is very strong. But it's also clear that President Trump, in his first term, challenged our Constitution and challenged the rule of law. And it really does test our institutions, whether or not we can survive.
Do you fear that a second Trump administration will be much more organized?
I think the only way he operates is by chaos. He doesn't learn. He basically thinks he has all the answers. He doesn't listen to advice. He doesn't usually have strong people around him. And for that reason, I don't see any reason that his approach to governing is going to change. I think it's going to continue to be chaotic.
Is it too much hyperbole to say that if Donald Trump is re-elected, that America could very well be on a path towards autocracy?
You know, he's talked about his first day in office being a dictator. And fortunately, our democracy doesn't work that way. I don't think you can suddenly walk into the Oval Office and become a dictator or end the way we govern ourselves in our democracy. But having said that, when you have a president who's constantly challenging the Constitution, challenging the rule of law, challenging whether or not we should have free and fair elections, not telling the truth to the American people, and clearly a president who doesn't even want to exercise world leadership in a very dangerous world. You have somebody that is going to continue to threaten the strength of our democracy without question.
There's been a lot of media coverage as well about these allied bodies to Trump who are putting forward a manifesto for his second term should he win office. And one of the key themes of that is this idea of firing independent public servants and replacing them with political appointees. What do you think of that?
Well, it's a prescription for chaos in our democracy. To take a position that you want to get rid of civil servants, that you want to get rid of, frankly, those who are truly dedicated to protecting our Constitution, and to basically put in individuals that are part of kind of his organized effort to try to turn our democracy upside down. I've never thought in my life that I would see somebody elected to the presidency who is somebody who is against the very values that this country stands for, which is preserving and protecting and defending the Constitution. It's going to weaken our country. It'll weaken our democracy. It'll weaken our leadership in the world.
You've had Donald Trump once. Now there's the prospect, according to the polls, that it could be Donald Trump a second time. Why is he so popular?
Look, I think it's fair to say that we've been through a period of dysfunction in terms of our democracy. We are a much more polarized country. We're much more divided the parties are much more partisan. I've often tell the students at our institute that in a democracy, we govern either by leadership or by crisis. If leadership is there and willing to take the risks associated with leadership, then we can avoid crisis. But if leadership is not there, for whatever reason, then we'll govern by crisis. And I think too often in this country we have largely governed by crisis.
You're a former defence secretary. What do you make of the way, even in his previous term, he wanted to invoke the Insurrection Act to put the military on the streets to deal with protesters?
Oh, I don't think there's any question that he'll try to do that. He tried to do it when he was president before. He basically wanted to use the military to go after protesters. He wanted to use the military to go after immigrants crossing our border. He's wanted to use the military to basically help him control others. I mean, I think he's enamored by autocrats in the world. He's enamored by autocracy. He's enamored because, he sees autocrats as having ultimate power to do whatever the hell they want, including using the military to follow that person's orders. I'm a believer in our system of checks and balances. And I think ultimately that if he's elected president of the United States, it will be a failed presidency. Look, Donald Trump is a bully. He's not just a narcissist, he's a bully. And everything he does reflects kind of the bully on the playground who tries to push himself around and have his way. And I think that even though there are those that might feel that it's a good way to shake up Washington, I also think that they ultimately know that it can literally destroy our democracy. And so I just, what I see right now is going to be a tremendous amount of chaos that will weaken America. But I don't believe that chaos ultimately will be allowed to destroy our democracy.
Donald Trump seems to think that the intelligence community is part of this deep state and that he's going to do something about that. Putting your former director of the CIA hat on, is that another institution that can withstand Donald Trump?
Well, look, he's somebody who has no respect for intelligence or for those that collect intelligence, because he's somebody who doesn't like to be told the truth. He doesn't want to hear bad news. And for those that used to brief him when he was the former president, they always ran into a problem of him not wanting to actually read the president's daily brief, not actually wanting to even be briefed on the threats to this country. And so, although he's somebody that has no respect for intelligence, I think the bottom line is that more than anything else will guarantee his failure. Because I know of no president, no military leader, no leader in this country that is able to provide leadership without good intelligence, without knowing what our enemies are up to, without knowing what the threats are, and being able to then take steps to protect this country. If he rejects getting the truth of what's really happening out there, what he's doing is basically assigning an execution order for his administration.
Does it also weaken the safety and security of Americans, though, if you have a president like that?
It won't just be the president who pays a price for stupidity. It'll be a threat to all Americans. America is great because we've combined not only a strong military power, but we've also combined it with a strong diplomatic capability to build relationships with other countries. We live in a dangerous world. I mean, that world is not going to change when the next president gets elected. We're facing threats from Russia, threats from China, threats from North Korea, threats from Iran, threats from terrorists. It's a dangerous world that we live in. And if a president thinks you can hide from that and not have to confront that, he'll make our country vulnerable to our adversaries and to others who are trying to weaken our democracy. So he, in many ways, he would not only be undermining our American security, he'd be undermining his own security as President of the United States.
You've spoken of security and of diplomacy. What would Donald Trump 2.0 mean for NATO, for that alliance, the NATO alliance, for example?
Well, look, I'm a believer that the key to dealing with this dangerous world is to build alliances, not destroy alliances. And if you have a president that basically rejects that and says that somehow America can be on its own, that we can return to isolationism, which is what some people thought would be a key prior to World War II, is a prescription for failure. And so I think if we have a president who doesn't want to strengthen those kinds of alliances and basically withdraws from the rest of the world, then I think it's going to put our national security at great risk.
Were you stunned when this year Trump said that he would encourage Russia to attack NATO allies whom he considers to have not met their financial obligations? Were you stunned by that comment?
Yeah, I mean, that is not just the stupidest statement I've heard somebody make. It also, frankly, borders on being a traitor to our country. I mean, to basically say that an enemy, an adversary like Russia, ought to be able to attack other NATO countries and that we're not going to do anything about it, I think betrays our country, betrays what our Constitution is all about, betrays who we are as a people. So, you know, there are some people that kind of take those kinds of statements by Trump as some kind of stupid joke by this bully. I think we have to take it seriously because it is without question the kind of behavior that will undermine not only our alliances in the world, but it'll undermine our security.
And what would the return of Donald Trump mean for the war in Ukraine against that adversary, Russia?
I think a president who stood next to Vladimir Putin in Helsinki and said to the world that he trusted Russian intelligence more than he trusted our own intelligence as to what was happening with Russian interference in our election. That, in my mind, was a total surrender to our greatest adversary, which is Russia. And so I'm looking at somebody who will be willing to let a tyrant do whatever he wants in the world. And that's not what America's all about. I believe it is our responsibility today to be able to unify with our allies to stop Putin from succeeding. And if Trump were to essentially conspire with Putin to allow Ukraine to fall, he would be planting the seed for Putin moving into other democracies to try to get rid of them as well. So it's a frightening prospect. But again, I really have to believe that in the end, this country has too much common sense, too much spirit, too much beliefs in what our democracy is all about to give another tyrant that kind of power.
What about these 4 trials or 4 court cases, 2 state, 2 federal against him? What could he do about that, in your mind?
He's going through a trial now. I think whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, nobody is above the law. Nobody is above the law.
Are you concerned, though, if he becomes president, he could order trials shut down or pardon himself, at least with the federal cases?
Yeah, no, I think, again, that he is going to make an effort to pardon himself. He'll probably make an effort to try to get rid of whatever charges are out there that he faces. He is going to, as most bullies do, try to do whatever's necessary to kind of protect him from having to face justice. I don't think it's going to be that easy. You can say all kinds of things that you want to get done, and you can threaten all kinds of things. But to then walk into the Oval Office and have to make those things happen, no president has the power to do that. The people who put our Constitution together designed a Constitution in which power would not be centralized in any one branch of government. They didn't want a king, they didn't want a king parliament, they didn't want a star chamber court.
What are the big issues in this election that's coming up in November, do you think?
I think this election's going to be about Donald Trump. It'll be about Trump and whether or not people are really going to make a decision that risks our democracy.
How important is it that leaders surround themselves with people who will challenge them, who will sometimes even disagree with them? How important is that?
That's very important. I think it's one of the most important qualities for a president of the United States, and for that matter, any leader, is the ability to be able to put people around you who are not just yes people, who are not just going to kneel before you, but who are willing to stand up, give you the kind of straight information you need.
What happens when a president doesn't have those people around them or removes those people around them and instead is surrounded by sycophants and enablers?
It is essentially what you see happening in an autocracy, because most tyrants don't like to have people around them who tell them that they're making a mistake. Autocracies, leaders don't listen to people. They make decisions that they think are in their best interest, even if they're not in the best interest of their country.
So finally, just in summing up, you think if Donald Trump does win this election, there'll be chaos, but America's institutions will weather that storm?
No, I've thought long and hard about it. I don't like the prospect of having to deal with Donald Trump again, because it was bad enough the first time. I think that even if we make a mistake in who we elect to office, that we will not allow that individual to simply get away with destroying everything that we love about our democracy and everything our men and women in uniform fought to protect.